Hey guys, Mike here with a quick announcement. If you're not following us on our social media, make sure to do that. With every new episode, we're going to be releasing a photo album on our Facebook and Instagram accounts. If you're visual like I am and you want to see what we're talking about, this is the way to go because we'll be posting images with timestamps and putting up exclusive content that could only be found on our social media. And now, back to the show.
We're going to talk about something that has just recently started making the news if you've been following some watch news, and that is CPO watches.
Certified Public
Orifice.
Wait. Whose orifice is certified and pre-owned that is up for sale in Switzerland?
Certified pre-owned, or at least I call it certified pre-owned because I worked in the auto industry and that's what we called it there. If you think about the current situation, which is that we quite probably have over 100 million watches in the world floating around used, and that there is at least a $15 billion a year industry in the sales of those used watches, I think it's kind of damning to the intelligence or purported intelligence of the people running the watch companies that for the most part, they have not taken in any part in this industry. And by this industry, I mean the pre-owned watch market, with very few exceptions. In chronological order, the first that I know of is the Omega Vintage Boutique in London that has been operating for several years. And that was the only place in the world where you could go buy a vintage watch from the manufacturer and be guaranteed that it was absolutely original and functioning perfectly. More recently, FP Journe announced that he would be repurchasing watches that he's made in the past for refurbishment, servicing, and eventual resale through his own boutiques. And then even more recently than that, the new CEO of IWC announced that IWC would enter the vintage/used watch market. Now, we don't know exactly in what way because it hasn't been defined, but let's say it's a fair expectation that IWC will repurchase watches, service, restore them as needed, and resell them, hopefully with the same level of certification and warranty that Omega and FP Journe offer.
So I'm not 100% versed on what the warranties are and how they differ from manufacturer to manufacturer. And I'm talking about new. I think most of them are about 2 years, right?
Most are 1 or 2 years. Some are longer. I know that one of the things Omega did actually when they released the coaxial, they also increased the warranty to be 3 years. And I believe at that time, that was the longest warranty that anybody offered. And I think they have now since increased it again, although I'll be honest, at this moment, I'm not sure. Is it 5 years now?
For new watches, I believe Rolex did for 5 years. I think the watches that are sold after 2015, if I'm correct, and I'm speculating here, that they wanted to kind of minimize the onslaught of new watches for service. And there's an issue of manpower. The industry has failed, in my opinion, to produce adequate number of service technicians, service watchmakers to meet the demand of all the watches that are in circulation worldwide.
Well, you may have also prematurely answered the question, which is, how come it hasn't been done yet? I think speculation on our part would say that most manufacturers probably could not turn out watches also in enough volume to produce a portfolio of certified used watches. Even a huge manufacturer like Omega that's been doing it for many years now only does it out of one boutique. So logic would say, well, if they're doing it, couldn't they just scale it up? And I guess the answer is no.
Well, let's think about it for a minute. They would be competing against themselves by making available pre-owned watches. I mean, that was probably the initial thought. But when they realized they're losing out on so much revenue from the luxury pre-owned market, and also the negative effects that the others are bringing onto the brand, like those who don't do the job properly, and who are only interested in flipping the watch and not really doing the proper work to the mechanism. In fact, I wrote a research article and I gave a presentation in December of 2015 to a Swiss delegation about this very topic. And it became very apparent that they need to get into this, but also they can't do it on their own.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I'm not really understanding why Omega would be competing against themselves if they were in the pre-owned market.
Not to interrupt you, Mike, but I will actually also say my piece after you. I disagree with you. you. I think they wouldn't be competing against themselves. I think it is to their advantage.
Exactly. That's what I'm confused about.
Conventional wisdom would make people think that they would be competing against themselves by selling pre-owned watches or servicing their pre-owned watches and then selling those instead of the new ones. But I think if we were to analyze the costs involved, I think there's probably a lot more net profit in the servicing of the watch. That's why there is such a huge independent market, or independents are doing it.
My thought would be, just to hyper simplify this, if I owned a company that manufactured a product and I manufactured different products over time, which is the situation here.
Sure.
And you told me, well, you could actually resell every product you've ever made instead of manufacturing 1, 2, 3, and eventually 50, 100 different products. You could manufacture a small number of products, manufacture, let's say 10, but the 100 or 200 different products that you've manufactured throughout the time you've existed, you have the opportunity to actually sell them again and just keep increasing your product portfolio, increasing the number of individual SKUs, individual items you can sell, and take a profit from each one. That sounds incredibly inviting. Doesn't that sound great?
Well, yeah, with that additional income, you can actually turn that over to R&D and create better products.
Right.
Take IWC. This is a watch that is yours, Mike. I have it in my hands. It's the Mark 16. How much did you pay for it, roughly? Or how much was it, the retail price?
I don't know, because my brother bought it for me as a birthday present.
What, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000? What is it?
I believe they were around $3,000 without the bracelet. On the strap,
on
they
a
were
strap.
around $3,000.
So $3,000 for a stainless steel watch. Nice anti-reflective coating on the crystal. Automatic movement, I'm going to guess something like an ETA 2092.
Yeah.
And how long have you had this watch for? About
a long time. 6 years.
So now it's time for service, and it needs service. So you can,
very much so.
Right. You can have it sent in for service. So cost whatever it costs, $300, $400, $500. And then it'll be back in circulation for another 5, 7 years. In that time period, you haven't bought another watch. So essentially, the company hasn't made a new sale to you in the same category.
Sure.
Now, imagine if this watch disappeared, hypothetically speaking, like magic, but you really love the watch.
Yes.
So you go and buy another one. So that translates into more sales and profit to the company.
Sure.
In a magical way, if the companies were able to just flip on a switch and watches would disappear off clients' wrists by some magic, and they'd go in and just buy another one because they love that same brand, that will be great for the brand, I think. But that's not the case, is it? Because it ends up being on a secondary market or in a drawer somewhere. So they need to keep making sales. So that's kind of the conundrum, I think, keeping a balance between new merchandise, old merchandise, and generating new sales. And that's kind of what we're talking about with a LPO.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point.
I agree with you. I think the problem that the watch companies have is that they are so narrow-minded that all they can think about in terms of sales is, how do you sell something? You build a new watch, you sell a new watch. No, sorry, times change. And all those watches you've built still exist. So now the idea of what you're selling, you can sell service, you can sell a used watch. Ultimately, what you're selling is you're selling an experience.
There you go. There you go. That's the word that I was looking for. The experience.
Now, customer experience is the absolute name of the game.
Absolutely.
It's going to define how you're successful as a company. Now, it's not going to just be, how can we pump out these new watches and sell them at a premium? I have given this advice to many people in the watch industry working in the retail sector. And I say, you really shouldn't disregard the people that are coming in with used watches to get them serviced, because without them having bought those used watches, your other customers wouldn't be buying new ones. So the only way to sell a new watch, just like in the car industry, like I said before, the only way to sell a new one is to sell a used one. And as the need for new ones decreases, there is a market for used watches, that there is a market for the service of those watches, and figure out how to excel from a customer experience to do good work, turn out a good service product, turn out a good used product, and do it at a profit. Do it in a way that it matters to the company and isn't an afterthought.
I want to add to that. Watch owners haven't accepted the fact that to do a service or a complete factory service on a watch properly actually is quite difficult, because there is no simply a drain plug under, the back of a case where you can open it up and empty out the old oil and then add new oil and close it for $35, $40, $50 like you can do in a car.
Sure.
So the aspect of servicing that watch properly is quite complicated. It's difficult, but for a variety of reasons, many brands have tried to mitigate or minimize the importance of service in order not to scare the client away from purchasing a new watch. They'll tell you, oh yeah, service is not a big deal. It'll only be like $100, $200, $300, maybe $500. Now you're going into the $500 category of complete service, and people starting to kind of cringe.
Including myself.
Including yourself. Yeah. But I always say, if you were to see the work that is required to do it correctly, that it lasts another 5, 7, 8, 9 years between services, then you're going to come around and tell me, you know what? I wouldn't do this job for $900, or I would do it for maybe $900. And this is not just, toot the horn of those who do good work, but that's what's really required to do it correctly. So a lot of brands, unfortunately, or whatever it is, they either break even on service or they lose money. That's been a tradition of the watch industry. But they've come around, and now they've seen that they can't operate on that business model, and they need to create revenue elsewhere.
Chase, when you said the experience, when I said you nailed it, you really did.
Well, thank you.
Because in my opinion, the watch is the experience. Yes. And you're buying something that is several thousands of dollars that is going to last a very, very long time, that really does not provide a purpose other than being on your wrist and being something that you enjoy. Because face it, even I do it. You're going to reach into your pocket and you're going to check your iPhone for time sometimes.
Well, I have to say that there's a problem with that statement, because I think that a lot of the issues that these manufacturers that don't properly service a watch, that haven't come into the CPO market, they think like that. They think the purpose, the experience of the watch is having it on your wrist. With that mindset, it doesn't really matter how well it works.
Yes and no. I understand what you're saying, but for most people, for most consumers, they're going into a boutique or wherever to purchase a new piece. It's not about how accurate the watch is. Now, if you were to compare something, let's say like an Omega versus a Rolex, because you're a watch geek like the three of us and hopefully everybody that's listening, yes, you might go into the accuracy. Yes, you might go into how well A watch is doing versus B watch in terms of variational positions, whatever. But the majority of the people that buy these things are not us. We make up a smaller, I don't know how big the hardcore watch geek market is. It's not enough to populate 1 million watches by Rolex every year. It's not enough.
No.
We're a very small fraction of that. So what I think is an issue here with Swiss watch companies, and let's not just put the Swiss on blast here, because it really makes no sense, because there are other culprits in this whole thing. It's not like the Swiss are the only ones in this world that are producing watches. They tend to be at the forefront because Swiss-made used to be luxury, right? It used to have a certain gravitas, which I think it's losing because of the lax regulations on Swiss-made, that label itself, but we won't go into that today. I think really the key aspect of this is, again, the experience. When you're buying a $3,000 watch, you want the experience that's associated with wearing a $3,000 item. And you, as a consumer, are probably going to have that for a long time if that was a major purchase for you. Mm-hmm. But the thought process, or at least my assumption with the thought processes of the Swiss watch companies, is it's more of a good that could be turned over faster. Maybe they're focusing a little too much on people that have more income than the majority of their customers. And what I mean by that is when you buy a watch, it's not like you buy a Mercedes, say an S-Class, right? Why does the S-Class depreciate so fast? I read a few years ago that it's been consistent about being the fastest depreciating car, and there's a reason behind it. It has nothing to do with the S-Class being a poor quality or good quality car. It has everything to do with the buyer. The buyer that buys an S-Class does not want a pre-owned S-Class because they can afford a brand new S-Class. Yes. So they're not going to go out and buy something that's pre-owned, even if it has 5,000 miles on it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Ferrari. Why is a Ferrari depreciating massive, massive amounts as soon as you literally put the key in. And it's a cyclical thing with Ferrari. Ferrari's kind of an outlier because first the car will take a dive in value and then it'll appreciate. Kind of sort of what Rolex was experiencing, right? Not to get too far into those details, the experience is extremely important, and Ferrari experience is the Ferrari experience. You have to make sure that the service records are there. You have to make sure that everything is in line, or else you're not going to get a car that is considered a true, perfect Ferrari. If you're buying a vintage Ferrari or if you're buying an older Ferrari, you want service records because it's an item that is going to potentially explode on you. Well, it'll probably explode on you even if it was serviced well. But you want that because that is the experience. You're buying something that has a legacy. You're buying something that is, I don't know. I don't even know what the description of something like that
I would say, though, that that would apply to almost any product that falls into that specialist collector category. I can tell you it's definitely not exclusive to Ferrari.
Right.
Once any product reaches that hyper collector status, whether it's a Ferrari, whether it's hell even a Toyota 2000, what's considered to be the first collectible Japanese car.
Yeah, it just hit $1 million at auction, which was nuts. Or something close.
Yes. Anytime you have a product that is important to people, they're going to want provenance.
Sure, but I think just to kind of wrap this up, what the Swiss are doing, and I hate to just say what the Swiss are doing, I think what watch companies are doing is they're focusing kind of like on a GM conversion. You have a car company that needs to put something out new every year at a car show just to maintain some interest from the buying public. Whereas with a watch company, you don't need to do that because that good can be around for way, way past after you've evacuated your body.
Right.
But cars, they don't last as long, and that's why you need a lot more conversion. You need new products. You need new advancements because you're going to get in that car, and you need it not to sway in that opposite lane so you don't die.
Right.
It's not the same with watches, and that's why I think the experience is so much more important. It's so much more important.
As long as I've been involved with actively collecting watches, and quite frankly, I wasn't paying attention to Rolex's service policy when I was 5 years old. So let's just say for the past 15 years, I've been aware that their legacy support has been worse than, I think, all of their competitors.
Do you think that's because they put out the most watches?
No, because they have the least number of product variations. Rolex has made less different calibers over the past 50 years
Than Hoyer.
than any of their competitors. So they have a smaller number of variants to support, yet they support less proportionally.
You make a ton of sense there. They're one of the very few companies that have built their core product and slightly revised their core product. I'm not really sure how their profit margin is, but I'm assuming based off of how they've been able to scale the company, because they have their own foundry, because they have their own infrastructure, they probably have an insane profit margin.
Yes.
Just want to comment on what you were saying, Chase, earlier, is that by having a smaller variance, is that what you said? Or
Smaller variants.
variants, yeah. The reason it's done is obviously is to create as few external casing parts as possible compared to, say, other brands who have a crazy number of models.
Oh, yes.
So by having only, I don't know, just top of my head, 5 or 6 different crowns that fit across all their models, it's super. It's sweet for them.
And also movements as well.
Yeah,
true.
So taking chronographs out of the equation, because Rolex didn't produce their own chronographs until very recently. Anyways, let's look at the past 60 years of Rolex movements, time only. Men's movements have had 3 major generations in the past 60 years. The 1500s, the 3000s, the 3100s. We just barely, last year, I think, came up with the 3200 series.
Right.
Of course, there are numbers, yes, within the 1500s, there are different calibers, but really, let's say there's one mothership.
Right.
Yeah, one base, one Eboche.
As a manufacturer, that's ideally what you want to do. Is that 3200 series, 3100 series, the 3000 series, and then of course they are also in the ladies' sizes. 3 different calibers in the automatic, and then going all the way back to the 10, 30, 40s.
I said in the past 60 years.
Okay.
Why I said that is because the 1500 caliber, to my knowledge, is actually the earliest one they will support. So
Right.
Basically, if you own a bubble back, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah,
well,
the
anything
earlier
that's
bubble back.
pre-1030, the NA series or the 620, 720 series, those are the bubble backs. Those are definitely not supported anymore.
I'm more confused than I ever was.
and that's actually saying quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to confuse me because I'm not, the sharpest tool in the shed, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about.
There is a lot to talk about, and suffice it to say that there are enough watches out there for all of you. There are just so many different flavors and choices for you to find something that will be a very good quality piece.
So basically, at the end of the day, the lesson is buy a $200 Seiko.
This episode of On Time was recorded and engineered by Michael Senderovich with supervision by Tim Hatayama.
Team OTP is Kenshu Production and Savada and Dune on social media.
Our theme song was composed and recorded by Hubie Wang, and our expert on this episode is Manuel Yazijian. Follow him on Instagram at Manuel Watchmaker.
And while you're on Instagram, make sure to follow us as well at On Time Podcast. For the entire OTP team, this is Mike.
And this is Chase. Thank you for listening to On Time.